As some of you may know, I am a huge fan of the Wild West. I mean, enormous. Maybe not as big as some, but I'm talking like just something about those days. It was just so simple. You know what I mean? Today, I kind of felt like just covering one of the most iconic figures ever of the Wild West. His name is Bass Reeves, and we're gonna, chit-chat about him a little bit. Just a smidge, maybe about 20 minutes worth. The year was 1885. The air in Indian Territory was thick with summer heat and gunpowder. Two outlaws, armed, desperate, and cornered, waited in a hidden camp along the Cimarron River. The man hunting them wasn't white, wasn't famous, and wasn't supposed to survive this kind of work. Yet by dawn, one outlaw was dead, the other in chains, and their captor rode off into the mist, polishing his badge before tucking it back into his vest. That man was Bass Reeves. He wasn't a dime novel hero or a legend spun up by Hollywood. He was a real U.S. Deputy Marshal who arrested over 3,000 fugitives, killed 14 men in shootouts, and never once took a bullet himself. His story challenges every myth the Wild West sold us and forces us to confront who really wore the badge when the frontier turned lawless. Bass Reeves was born into slavery in July 1838 in Crawford County, Arkansas. His enslaver, William S. Reeves, was a state legislator and farmer who eventually moved the family and Bass with him to Texas. During the Civil War, Bass served his enslaver's son, George Reeves, who became a Confederate officer. Legend says Bass escaped after a heated argument during a card game. Some stories claimed he struck his enslaver and fled into Indian Territory. However it happened, by 1863 he was free, hiding among the Creek and Seminole nations. There he learned their languages, customs, and terrain. Those years in exile hardened him and gave him the skills that would later make him one of the most effective lawmen in American history. When slavery was abolished, Reeves settled near Van Buren, Arkansas. He farmed, raised a family, and quietly built a reputation for honesty and skill with a firearm. Locals said he could shoot a coin tossed in the air or split a playing card edgewise with a rifle bullet. He never boasted, never drank, and attended church regularly. In a region soaked in violence and whiskey, that alone set him apart. In 1875, President Ulysses S. Grant appointed Judge Isaac C. Parker to the Western District of Arkansas, a jurisdiction that covered all of Indian Territory. The area was crawling with fugitives who fled there to escape state law. Parker's job was to restore order, and he needed deputies who could ride those lawless trails without flinching. A U.S. Marshal named James F. Fagan was tasked with recruiting 200 deputies to serve under Parker. He'd heard rumors of a black man who knew the territory better than anyone, who could speak Creek and Cherokee fluently, and who could handle himself in a gunfight. That man was Bass Reeves. Despite being unable to read or write, Reeves had an extraordinary memory. He'd listen to his warrants being read, memorize every word, and recall names and details without a single mistake. His commanding presence and deep baritone voice added to his authority, standing 6'2" in an era when most men were several inches shorter. Reeves cut an imposing figure on the frontier. For the next 3 decades, Reeves rode under Parker's badge, enforcing federal law in a land where it barely existed. His beat stretched over 75,000 square miles of rugged terrain, creeks, plains, and forests, filled with men who'd rather die than face trial in Fort Smith. Reeves wasn't just a gunman. He was a strategist. He often rode alone for weeks, carrying only his guns, his warrants, and a bag of food. When hunting fugitives, he used disguises so convincing they bordered on theatrical. In one famous story, Reeves posed as a ragged tramp, wearing torn clothes and pretending to be a drifter on the run. He visited the home of 2 wanted men, gaining their trust by claiming he was hiding from the law himself. After 2 days of helping them on the farm, Reeves waited until they slept, then handcuffed both while they were eating breakfast. He marched them 40 miles back to Fort Smith without firing a shot. That is hilarious, dude. That is hilarious. Another time, he dressed as a preacher. The disguise worked so well that when he approached a cabin of armed outlaws, they lowered their guard to hear his sermon. By the time they realized who he was, they were staring down the barrel of his Colt revolver. His gun skills became local legend. Reeves carried 2 Colt 45s with a Winchester rifle, all polished to a mirror shine. He was ambidextrous and lightning fast. In one shootout, he reportedly dropped an outlaw with a single shot from horseback while reins hung loose around his wrist. But Reeves avoided violence whenever possible. He preferred cunning to killing, once saying, quote, "A man who can think his way through trouble is worth more than one who just shoots his way out." Which, I mean, true. You go in there with a brain, like you win. Among the hundreds of outlaws Reeves brought in, a few encounters became legend. Bob Dozer was one of the most dangerous men in Indian Territory. An outlaw who robbed banks, rustled cattle, and ambushed lawmen. No marshal could bring him in. Reeves hunted him for months across the Cimarron Hills. When he finally found Dozer's camp in December 1878, the two exchanged words, then bullets. Reeves shot Dozer dead in a single shot. Single, precise exchange. Then there was Jim Webb, a man accused of murder who swore he'd never be taken alive. Reeves tracked him into the Creek Nation, waited for him outside a cabin, and called for his surrender. Webb refused, firing first. Reeves shot him twice, one bullet to the chest, another through his neck. Webb survived just long enough to curse Reeves's name before collapsing. Despite these deadly confrontations, Reeves was known for his fairness. He treated black, white, and native suspects alike, rare for his time. He fed prisoners from his own rations and often refused bribes. Word spread quickly through the territory. If Bass Reeves has a warrant for you, you might as well give up. Perhaps his most incredible record. In the 30 years of law enforcement, Reeves killed 14 men in self-defense, arrested more than 3,000, and was never wounded. Not once. For all his heroism, Reeves' life wasn't without heartbreak. In 1902, he faced the most agonizing duty of his career, arresting his own son. Benny Reeves had been charged with murdering his wife after a domestic argument spiraled out of control. When Bass learned of it, he didn't hesitate. He personally requested the warrant, telling the marshal's office that no man, family or not, could stand above the law. It was a choice that sent shockwaves through Fort Smith and Muskogee. He tracked Benny down with the same precision he used for any fugitive, relying on informants and instinct, refusing assistance from other deputies. When he finally confronted his son, he didn't raise his gun. Benny, defeated, simply handed it over. Father and son rode in silence for hours before reaching Fort Smith, Bass refusing conversation, eyes fixed ahead. The arrest became instant legend. Newspapers called it proof of his incorruptibility. Judge Parker's old clerk said that if the hanging judge had still been alive, he'd have commended Reeves on the spot. To fellow marshals, it showed a kind of moral gravity no badge could teach, a living example of law above blood. Yet, those who knew Bass saw the weight it left behind. His pastor in Muskogee recalled him staying long after services ended, head bowed at the altar. Friends said he aged a decade that year, the crease in his brow deepening, the humor leaving his eyes. He never spoke Benny's name again in public. Even so, Reeves never allowed personal grief to cloud his work. He saw justice as sacred, not situational. In an era when corruption and favoritism defined frontier politics, Bass Reeves proved that integrity could still exist in the West, even when it cost him everything. And that says a lot. That says a hell of a lot about, Bass Reeves. I mean, even cops today have a problem bringing in their own family members. So back in the Wild West, when he could have been like, oh no, he got away, he totally could have assisted his son in getting the hell out of there, but he didn't. And that shows the type of man that he is. That shows that not only was he an honest man, he was a good man. You know what I mean? Like, there's a difference between a nice guy and a good man. He was a good man. He had morals he stood on. That comes out the mouth of Matthew McConaughey. By 1907, Oklahoma had achieved statehood, and the old federal marshal system dissolved. Reeves was 70 years old, an age when most men had long hung up their guns, but retirement wasn't in his vocabulary. He joined the newly formed Muskogee Police Department as a patrolman. Former outlaws now watched from porches as the same man who'd once hunted them rode past in uniform. To many, his presence was enough to keep the peace. No one wanted to test the legend, which you would think they'd just be like, oh, 3,000 arrests. We're just going to make you like chief of police of the whole ass state. Even as his hair grayed and his gait slowed, his instincts remained razor sharp. Younger officers sought his mentorship. He taught them how to read the flicker in a suspect's eyes before a draw, how to command a room without shouting, and how to keep their tempers holstered longer than their guns. Reeves often said, "A badge doesn't make you brave. Patience does." He continued serving until Bright's disease began to weaken his kidneys. Colleagues begged him to rest, but he'd still mount his horse and short pistols, insisting, "The law never sleeps, so why should I?" When his health finally forced retirement in 1909, the department held a small ceremony. Reeves turned in his badge polished to a mirror shine, thanked his men, and walked home through the streets he'd once made safe. Neighbors later recalled seeing him sitting on his porch in the evenings, boots shined, revolvers cleaned, watching the Oklahoma sunset spread across the plains he had once conquered on horseback. Children would wander up to hear stories, unaware that the quiet old man before them had outlived almost every outlaw his age. On January 12, 1910, Bass Reeves passed away at 71. The Muskogee Phoenix printed a short obituary, but there was no grand send-off, just a modest service attended by family and a handful of officers. For decades, his grave went unmarked, a forgotten resting place for the man who'd brought peace to half a continent. Only generations later would historians unearth his record. Over 3,000 arrests, 14 deadly gunfights, and a career that redefined the meaning of justice on the frontier. Time had nearly buried his name, but legends that real don't lie. They just wait for the truth to catch up. And if I remember correctly, and I might bring this up later, if I remember correctly, it was either Arkansas or Oklahoma put up a portrait of him in their Capitol building, and he is the first African American hung up in that Capitol building, period. For decades, Bass Reeves' story all but vanished from mainstream history. Early Western films and novels ignored him. Hollywood created its own sanitized version of the frontier. White hats, white heroes, and stories told through a narrow lens. Yet many historians now believe that Reeves directly inspired the fictional Lone Ranger. The parallels are undeniable. A masked lawman riding through Indian territory, accompanied by a native tracker, using disguises and cunning rather than brute force, and guided by a strict moral code. The character just appeared in the 1930s, right after Reeves' exploits had faded from public memory. But the real man's story is more impressive than any fiction. Reeves broke racial barriers in one of the most violent, divided eras in American history. He operated with integrity in a system that barely recognized his humanity. His courage helped lay the foundation for law and order across what would become Oklahoma and Arkansas. In 2012, a 25-foot statue of Bass Reeves was unveiled in Fort Smith, Arkansas, facing the old courthouse of Judge Parker. It's more than a monument. It's an overdue acknowledgement. Bass Reeves' life forces us to reconsider everything we think we know about the American frontier. He wasn't just another gunslinger or bounty hunter. He was proof that justice in the Wild West didn't belong to one race, one story, or one myth. He rose from slavery to become one of the greatest lawmen in American history. He memorized thousands of warrants without being able to read them. Unwitted killers who thought they could outgun him, and upheld the law even when it demanded the unthinkable. When people talk about heroes of the Old West, Earp, Hickok, Masterson, Reeves belongs at the top of that list. He was the embodiment of duty over fame, of character over myth. In his time, few newspapers celebrated him. Few writers chronicled his deeds. But the truth has a way of resurfacing. Today, historians, filmmakers, and storytellers are finally giving Bass Reeves the recognition he earned through grit, sacrifice, and unwavering principle. He didn't need a silver bullet or a radio theme song. He had something rarer, the truth. And you snoring back there, baby? And sometimes that's the greatest legend of all. So today, wrapping up this episode, I do want everybody to know, I've got some documents in there, and I can't confirm whether or not that's Reeves' handwriting or not. I can't even confirm whether he could or could not read or write, But nonetheless, we do have arrest records. We've got it. It's all in there. You know, there's so much documentation of him. And for this episode, obviously, and some of the visuals, links will be down in the description and coming up after this. And honestly, I love doing Wild West stuff. So I'm saying it's my favorite thing to do. It's my favorite thing to cover is Wild West, for sure. 100%. Out of all the things I cover, the Wild West is my favorite. So, thank you for watching. This is my coverage of Bass Reeves, the most epic legend of the Wild West. Absolute freaking legend of a man.